Hello, Brother Sewing and Crafting family. Angela Wolf here, and I'm so excited to see you. I'm laughing because I just got caught into a rainstorm. So hopefully you're having a better day than that. And guess what? You all asked for more sew-alongs, right? Remember the grocery bag one? I've made, I think, 12, 11 or 12 since then. Yeah, you all said, could we do another sew-along? Guess what? Brother heard you and they've got something fabulous for you. So wait till you see what we have planned for you today. So say hi, say where you're from. We're streaming on the Sewing YouTube and Facebook channels. And Wendy Chow is here with a great announcement, a super fun sew along. Wendy, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing fabulous besides getting stuck in the rain. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Yes, we have another sew along coming out, which is really exciting. It's actually part of National Quilting Month, and of course, we will have a quilting project. So right behind me, I'm actually sitting in front of it. We are going to be making a quilt from start to finish within 6 weeks. So it's a throw size quilt, and really I'm going to try and carefully move this. So hopefully you can see more of it. It's a 6-week quilt along, and it's really just a skill builder to explore different quilting piecing techniques. Here we go. Hopefully you get a better view of this. I'll show you the full quilt on my iPad as well in a moment. But basically we are going to be exploring various quilting piecing techniques, for example, strip piecing. We've got flying geese, quick quarter units, quarter square triangles, split quarter square triangles, and half square triangles. So we're going to do this all within 6 weeks. So from cutting and preparing the fabric to all the way to piecing it all together, making a quilt top, and then we're going to baste the quilt, bind, and then you can enjoy this wonderful quilt at the very end of those 6 weeks. So I'm just going to quickly show you how the quilt looks like on the iPad. So then that way you can kind of see. So it's this, hopefully there's not too much glare there, but there you go.
So this is beautiful, the whole quilt. Wendy. Yeah. It's gorgeous.
Thank you so much. So it's a throw size quilt, so it's a perfect size. So it measures as 36 inches by 72 inches. Sorry, glare. Let me just get it closer to you. So yeah, that's how big the quilt is. So it's a really fun one. So yeah, that's basically it. It's the quilt along is free to join. The pattern's free as well, so you could download that from my website, but also we do have that link on the Brother Sew's blog, details blog of the quilt along in there as well, so you can download it from there. So free quilt along, the pattern's free as well. And I know that sometimes people might be jumping in later in the quilt along as well. You can join in at any point you want to. You can follow along, or you can go further along faster depending on what your schedule is like. But we will be sending out weekly emails as well throughout that quilt along period, which Angela, you could share that link, that Flowdesk link, and they can sign up to receive newsletters, weekly newsletters with prompts to make sure that you are following along with the quilt along. So that's kind of basically the details page. You just part of this, the sign up page, but there's another blog post on Brother Sew's and Stitching Social.
So that's what it looks like when you go to her website to sign up for the emails. And again, go to brothersews.com. That's where there's also the blog post. There's a combination of places you have to go. But the big thing is just, if you're on Brother's Facebook page, you can share this show. If you're on the YouTube page, you can share it. And that's a great way to go back and watch all of these, because she's going to be doing everything during a series of live shows. So we're very excited about this, Wendy. That quilt is gorgeous.
Why, thank you very much. Yes. And then, so for the example that I'm going to be creating, I'm going to use that same color palette that you saw that I just showed you on the screen. But of course, you can play around with different color palettes, make it the way that you want it to be. In the quilt pattern at the end, I also provide you with the exact colors if you want to replicate what you see on the screen, as well as behind me. So
I think
Anyway,
we have a lot of pink going on today, Wendy.
yeah, pinks, purples. I don't know what's going on. I'm even just wearing it as well. I'm matching. I went for what's on your mannequin too, and your
I
jacket,
know.
your trimming. So
Um,
it was just like telepathic.
So
Yeah.
while you're watching, we are live in the comments. So leave a comment. Are you going to join this? So Wendy, is there any skill level anyone should have, or is this pretty much anyone can sew because they can follow along?
Yeah, so for all skill levels, so as long as you have basic sort of like skills on how to operate a sewing machine, you're all good there. Because I'll be showing you step by step how to cut and prepare your fabrics, to piecing it together, making sure that you've got your seam allowances correctly lined up, and you can find it on your sewing machine. So it's just purely everything from start to end. I will show you how to baste, how to quilt, how to bind. So I will be here with you every step of the way, and hopefully with these skills that you take away from this project, you can use that to explore other quilting projects as well. So yeah.
Fantastic. So I'll let you take it away. All of you
Yeah.
can leave questions and comments in the chat, and Brother Social Team will be in there as well.
Great. All right. So today we are going to do, we're going to talk about preparing and cutting your fabrics. So if I'm going to just switch over to the other camera, this is my overhead desk. So there's quite a few things here at the moment. So what I've done so far is I've actually cut up, actually, let me just bring up the pattern up here, just so you kind of get a visual here, and hopefully you can kind of see this. So that's the design. And if I just keep scrolling, I'm scrolling down to the, say, fabric requirements. Hopefully you can get a closer look at it. So it will tell you how much fabric you need, and it's based on 42 inches width of fabric. So when you're shopping for quilting fabrics, generally they come at 42 inches width of fabric wide, width of fabric I meant, but sometimes it goes up to 44, 45, but generally it's 42 inches wide. And then when you purchase quilting fabric, it's already, it comes as folded in half by the width of fabric. So if you look at this, so it's folded in half here. Hopefully you can see that. It's folded in half. And then if I unfold it, that full length is 42 inches wide. And then this is 21 inches wide now because it's folded in half. So yeah, if you go to page 2 of the pattern, that will tell you all the fabric requirements. I've done a little bit of sort of preparation in advance because there's a lot of different pieces, as you can kind of see on this tray here. There's several different pieces. So I've actually, to avoid any sort of confusion, I've kind of created my own little swatch card. So I've cut out different swatches of each of the fabrics that I'm going to use. So this is fabric A, B, C, and D. And then I've also included, cut out a little fabric swatch for binding as well as the backing as well. So I could reference this as I'm cutting the pieces of fabric, because again, there's a lot going on here. And then if you go towards the, if you look at the cutting directions here, you'll find that some of the pieces, or actually all the pieces of different cuts of fabric, the different sizes, they have different labeling. So like A1, A2, A3. So I've actually created labels so then I can stay organized and I don't get confused throughout the project, because there are some certain pieces that you're required to cut that are very similar in size. So hopefully you can kind of see this. So that, for example, with fabric C, I need to cut 10 squares that are 10.5 inches and 2 squares that are 10.25 inches big. So they're very, very similar in size. That's why I introduced these fabric labels and given them different sort of names. That way it's easier for you to kind of differentiate and not get mixed up as you're cutting and putting the pieces of fabric together, because you don't want, sort of mistakes to kind of stop you along the tracks. And then also after the fabric labeling, you'll see that there's different sort of codes like SP, HST, QST, and so on. Those are basically the different types of blocks that that particular piece is for. So again, that just kind of makes it easier for you to kind of follow along and stay organized throughout the whole entire quilt along or the whole entire project. Not all quilt patterns do include that, but I just wanted to include that to make it as easy as possible for you. And then with the fabric labels, I've actually have this page at the very end. This is on page 18 of the pattern. So you can print this out, these labels, and then once you print it out, you can cut them all up, and then you can label them, your pieces of fabric, as you go. So I've cut mine up already. So I think we are ready to move on, and we're going to work together on how to cut fabric and read the pattern for fabric C. So I'm just going to move these out of the way. I'm going to keep these handy because I know that I'm going to cut fabric C. So all the fabric labels as well, you may have noticed as well. So the fabric labels you've got that start with the letter A and then start with letter B, C, and D. So basically the letters that start with A are fabric A, the letters that start with B reference fabric B, and so on. And this swatch card is really quick and easy to make as well. So I just cut them up and then I glue based it onto a piece of watercolor card, and it's nice and thick, so it stays pretty much intact as you're moving it around. It's not like a piece of like printing paper that's really flimsy. And so I glue based it, held these in place, and then just stitched a couple of lines to hold them in place permanently. So hopefully you can kind of see that. Okay, so I'm going to move these aside. So I'm going to cut fabric C, which is this really beautiful orangey red color. Angela, what's your favorite color?
I love that orange, but I'm going to have to go with pink. The pinks and purples that you have in that first one are gorgeous, but this orange is striking.
Yes, it's really, really nice. It kind of also reminds me of autumn, like the autumn leaves, just all like the pumpkins, just like about it. Okay, so we're at page 3 at the cutting directions, and we're going to focus on number fabric C. But before we actually cut into the fabric, there's a few things that you need to prepare, do some prepping in advance. So I've just laid this out, and you notice that it's quite a lot of crinkles in here. That's because I've stored this and had this folded up for a little while in my stash. So we're going to give it a good press before we do any cutting. So I'm just going to grab my wool pressing mat. Technically, I shouldn't really be ironing on top of my cutting mat, but this is a quick press, so I'm not too worried. But I have ruined a couple of cutting mats by pressing on it too long. So oops, so don't do that. So yeah, I'm just going to give this a quick press. You'll find that sometimes the creases can be a little bit stubborn, especially from just being stored away for some time. So what you could do is you could get a water spray bottle. Oh, if you don't mind switching back to the top one. Yeah. So you can see I've just given this a press, but you can still see that there's a bit of stubborn lines. So you could always, like, when you're done with this one side, you could flip it over and then do it the other way. Or you can get like a water spray bottle, you can use starch, you could use pressing spray. I'm just going to use this pressing spray and then just kind of do a couple of spritzes on more of the stubborn areas and press it out again. So you'll notice those splotches, and I'm just going to press over it, and hopefully you can see that some of those stubborn creases are coming out already.
Wendy, do you pre-wash? Do you pre-wash your fabrics?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so I'm on the non-pre-wash like crowd, but people do pre-wash as well. If you are planning on pre-washing your fabrics, pre-wash all of them. Don't just pre-wash some of it, and that's just going to keep that consistency. If people choose to pre-wash, just so that it removes that sort of that vintage crinkled kind of quilting look, or when they wash it. But I'm on the non-pre-washing team just because I'm really excited about creating and getting started on a project. So I kind of want to skip that step and go straight into the making. And I find it that after pre-washing as well, the fabric kind of goes a little bit limp. So it's just a little bit more difficult to kind of handle the fabric. So it's a personal preference. There's no right and wrong way in doing it. So do whatever is comfortable with you, but I'm team no pre-wash. So yeah. What about you, Angela? Do you pre-wash your fabrics before you
I love that
sew?
team. I love that. I'm team pre-wash. I'm actually team pre-wash because most of my stuff's for garments and it might shrink.
Right.
But
Oh,
when
yes.
it comes to quilting and crafting projects, then I'm on your team.
Yeah. And if you're worried as well, like if you've never used, say, like a particular brand or maybe a color, like a really bright color, you can always just throw it in the wash just in case. And you could use color catchers. Another tip as well is, in terms of the washing, is you could say you didn't pre-wash your fabrics before cutting, but you're worried about the colors running. So you could actually use some color catchers. You could probably put like maybe 2 or 3, depending on how big the project is. And yeah, just throw it in the wash, and generally the colors kind of stay intact, and the color catchers does its job. So there's a couple of other tricks up my sleeve in terms of colors running, pre-washing, so that kind of thing. So we're on our last bit. I'm just going to quickly do this. And do you use any pressing spray or starch at all, Angela?
Every once in a while I'll use starch, but I'm a big steamer. I use a
Oh,
lot of
yeah.
steam.
Oh, and I forgot to mention, speaking of steam, so when it comes to pressing and, like, ironing out the fabrics in preparation for quilting, as well as just, as you're pressing, as you're piecing, you just use like a hot, dry iron. And I just have it on the cotton setting, because pretty much all the fabrics that you use in quilting is cotton anyway. So all right, so I've done all the pressing already. I'm happy with that. I know it's still a little bit of creases there, but we've done our best here. And we're going to move on. We're going to move on to the actual cutting bit. So actually, before we do, we've got to make sure that the rotary cutter blade that you've got has a sharp blade. I kind of tend to change it every, like, say, 2 to 3 projects. Because you want to get this one glide, one movement to get your cut. Because if for example, if you're trying to, like, if your blade is like dull and you have to like go over it multiple times at one area, you're essentially just like, spending a lot of time firstly, but secondly, if you think about it, you're kind of cutting multiple quilts in that one go, if that makes sense. So yeah, you just want to make sure that you always have a sharp rotary cutter blade. And then when you're disposing of the blade, just make sure you do it carefully. You could wrap it up in some, like, scrap paper, and then carefully dispose of it, because you don't want someone to get hurt, or maybe your trash bag getting teared up, which is the worst. Anyway, so before we actually do any sort of cutting as well, we're going to remove this jagged edge here. So to do that, we are going to, you can pick any sort of horizontal line on this quilting ruler here, and we're going to match that up with the fold. So you can see that this is where the selvages are, and this is the fold. It's the fold crease. So you're going to match any horizontal line on here. And I'm going to match that, and then grab the quilting ruler, and then I'm going to remove that jagged edge. I might move this a bit further down so that it also catches that edge there. Okay, so I'm going to remove that. There you go. All right. And now I'm going to look at the quilt pattern and see what the instructions tell me to do. Okay, so we're going to cut fabric C. Hopefully you can see this. I'm going to bring it up closer. And it tells you to cut one strip that's 2 inches wide by width of fabric. And we know the width of fabric is 42 inches, and we talked about it earlier as well, that, you know, quilt fabric generally comes in 42 inches. And it also mentions in the fabric requirements that this pattern follows 42-inch width of fabric. So I'm just going to cut one strip that is 2 inches by 42 inches, and that is for strip piecing, which is SP. And what I like to do as well when I'm cutting is I kind of like to move my desk away from the wall. So I'm going to move my desk a little bit, and you'll sort of see why I like to, and the reason why I like to move my desk away from the wall is so that I could walk around my desk without actually having to tamper with the fabric. Because again, once you start tampering and moving your fabric a lot, that's where you get inaccurate cuts, which then leads to inaccurate piecing. And then it kind of then snowballs into like things not really matching up when it comes to putting the pieces together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this 2-inch width strip. I'm just going to move this down a little bit because the tripod legs are in the way. So I'm going to measure, it's a little bit upside down, topsy-turvy at the moment. So I'm going to measure 2 inches from this freshly nice straight edge. So it's, so it's 1 inch here and then 2 inches. So I'm going to cut this. And when you're cutting, always apply pressure with your non-dominant hand on the ruler so it doesn't shift around, and always cut away from your body. So, and when you're done cutting, always put the cap back on as well, because you don't want to hurt yourself. I have cut myself plenty of times with the rotary cutter, and it takes a little while to heal up, and it's not very pretty because the cutting mat can get pretty gruesome. So I've done this one strip, and going back to the pattern, so it says one strip by, well, it's 2 inches by 42 inches, and it's C1. So I'm going to find the C1 label, and I'm just going to pin that to that strip. So then that way, when it comes to sewing this piece up in the pattern, it's I can find it quickly and easy. So there you go. So this next bit is, it's going to ask you to cut one strip that's 11 inches by 42 inches, or by the width of fabric. And then within that strip, we're going to subcut and cut 3 squares that are 11 inches. So I'm going to show you this next bit, which will require 2 rulers to work, because if you look at this quilting ruler is 8.5 inches wide. So it's not going to be wide enough for me to get that 11 inches width. So I'm going to then introduce a second ruler. So this second ruler is a very big ruler. So it's a 16.5 inch wide. And I'm going back to the pattern, it says 11 inches wide strip. So I'm going to measure 11 inches from this nicely cut out straight edge. So 11 inches. So so it's from 11 inches from here. So 1, and then that goes up to 11. So I'm going to match this line up here with this edge. And then afterward, I'm going to like butt this longer ruler together. And then this, and I'm going to slowly and carefully remove this, and make sure that you're applying pressure with your non-dominant hand here to hold this in place. So this is, we've measured out that 11 inch wide strip, and then I'm going to cut. So again, pressure with the non-dominant hand, and then with your dominant hand, cut. All right. And then I'm going to carefully remove this, and I'm going to carefully sort of shift this away. And as you're kind of like shifting it, make sure that the fabric is, you don't shift it too much so that, it doesn't come off aligned, if that makes sense. And then now, before I actually do the actual cutting, I'm going to cutting off the squares, because we're going to cut 3 squares that are 11.5 inches. I'm going to remove the selvages here. So I'm going to use this big long ruler again, because this is not, I mean, you can use it with this one, but I find it's easier with this bigger one here. And I'm going to remove it. And when you're removing the selvage here, you want to make sure that you can use any horizontal line, or in this case, vertical line, and just match it up with these 2 straight edges here. So I'm just going to use this 4-inch line here as a guide for this edge. And I'm going to use this 15-inch guide here as this edge. And then I'm just going to remove that. So then it'll be, you get like a 90-degree angle here. So I'm going to carefully remove it. So again, non-dominant hand, apply pressure on the ruler, and then remove the fabric with your dominant hand. And you have to make sure that the rotary cutter is moving away from your body. Right, so I've done that. And then I just want to make sure, going back to the pattern, how many of these squares that I'm cutting. So it's always, remember, another good tip is to measure twice and then cut once. So we're working on C2, which is 3 squares that are 11 inches. So, all right, so I'm going to make my first proper cut. And when you're cutting, you notice that, remember, we talked about how with quilting fabrics, they come folded in half. So when I'm cutting, making this cut, I'm actually essentially making cuts for 2 squares, and you'll see in a little moment. So here you go. So I measured 11 inches from this edge here that we just cut. And then I'm just going to make sure, using any of the sort of vertical lines here as a guide, and I will just match it up with these 2 edges here. So I'm using 12.5 inches, and I'm using 1.5-inch guide there to help me out and making sure that I'm getting that perfect 90-degree angle on each of these corners. So again, apply pressure with the non-dominant hand, cut away from the body. And there you go. So you'll see, how I was mentioning that you end up cutting 2 squares. So these are 2 11-inch squares, I meant. And then we're going to cut the third one by unfolding this piece here. I'm going to come back around your side so you can kind of see it, or see how it looks like from your view. So I'm going to unfold this. You have a crease here, so you're more than welcome at this point to give it a quick press, so then it's nice and flat, but I'm kind of going to skip that step and just go ahead and cut that 11-inch square. So again, I'm going to use this edge here and line it up with 11 inches here. And then use any sort of horizontal line and match that up with the edge here. So it's got 13, and I'm going to use the 2-inch guide there to help me out with making sure that I've got that all matched up. And then again, non-dominant hand, apply pressure, and then cut with the dominant hand away from the body. And this I'm just going to put aside, and that can go into a scrap pile or could be used for something else. So I've cut up those three squares, and I believe that's labeled as C2. That's labeled as C2, and that's going to be used for the half square triangles, which is HST. Okay, so I'm going to quickly pin that so I don't get confused and label it as C2. So that you can kind of get an idea as to, like, if you got like a really big width, and your ruler can't actually accommodate that. So, you know, you've seen how it looks like in terms of using 2 quilting rulers to get those wider cuts going. All right, so we can do another one just so that you can kind of get an idea. So I'll just move this aside. Okay. So I'm just going to carefully move this. Again, trying not to tamper too much with the movement of this really nice straight edge that you've cut. And I'm just going to carefully unravel this. Again, trying not to tamper too much with that. A tip as well you could do is actually put a ruler on top, or like something that's heavy to stop it from moving as you're kind of shifting this around. So kind of like another pair of hands that you've got there. Okay, so this next bit, we're going to cut 3 strips that are 10.5 inches by width of fabric, and then we're going to subcut it and make 10 squares that are 10 inches, 10.5 inches I mean, and then 2 squares that are 10.25 inches. So this is again why it's really important to have those fabric labels, because those 2 measurements or those 2 types of squares, they can be easily jumbled up along, you know, all the work that you'll be doing for this particular project. So it's important to have those labels. So I'll just do one of these strips instead of actually all 3 strips, just so then that way you kind of get an idea. Okay, so I'm going to reintroduce this big quilting ruler again, and we're going to make one 10.5 inch wide strip. Okay, and then we are going to use this edge here, this nice long and crisp edge, and we're going to match that with 10.5 inches here. So it's 1 inch and then 10.5 inches. Hopefully that siren out there is not too noisy for you guys.
I thought that was just part of the entertainment.
Yeah, no, this is like the New York experience for you. I live right around the corner of the firehouse. So from time to time you kind of hear it. Okay, so we've measured the 10.5 inches here, and then what I've got to do is then get this long ruler, apply pressure with my dominant hand, so that this doesn't move around, because we did the hard work of measuring that 10.5 inches, and I'm going to butt this long ruler with this this big ruler that we've got going, and then I'm going to now apply pressure on this long ruler with my non-dominant hand, and then carefully remove this away, and then use my dominant hand to then cut this, and again away from the body. And I'm going to carefully lift this up, and then I'm just going to fold this a little bit, so then that way the weight of that the fabric doesn't completely drag my fabric off the table and then ruin all the placement of the fold. So this is coming from experience. Anyway, okay, so we are going to remove the selvage there. So again, I'm going to walk around my desk. Therefore, then I'm not going to be tampering with the placement and the movement of this fabric. So I'm going to walk around. And again, so we're going to remove the selvage. And in terms of measurements, I'm not too worried about the measurements on the ruler. I just really just simply want to get a nice clean cut relative to and that it's perpendicular to these 2 clean edges here. And I want to try and get it as close as possible to the selvage line. That way I'm not wasting all this fabric. So I think this looks great to me. So I use the 11.5 inch as a guide for me to get that nice and perpendicular. So I'm going to apply pressure with my non-dominant hand and cut away. Yeah, so never cross your hands, so like this, to try and cut, because it's very dangerous. Again, safety first. We don't want you guys to get hurt. Okay, so I'm going to move this, and what does the pattern say? So the pattern says that we need to cut 10 of these, which is 10.5 inch squares. So let's see how many 10.5-inch squares we can get out of this one strip. So I'm going to use my quilting ruler. I'm going to use this edge as my guide to get that 10.5 inches. There we go. You can see that's 10.5 inches, so one, and then it goes 10.5, and it's up against this nicely cut edge that we just did, and then make sure that these horizontal or vertical lines in your case are lined up with these two edges, and then we cut. So I just made two 10.5-inch square cuts here, and I'm going to come around your side and actually show you how that works. I just did a whole 360 spin on this thing. Hopefully you're not dizzy from that. Okay, so I'm just going to cut that. So 10.5 inches from here, this edge here, and then make sure that these horizontal lines are nicely lined up with the fabric as well, and then remove that. So then I've cut a total of 4 10.5-inch squares here. So I've done 4 out of the 10. I still need to cut another 2 strips, but I'm not going to go any further. I think you guys kind of got the idea of how that works in terms of reading the pattern. And then as you're continuing on with cutting, then you'll eventually have enough fabric out of those 3 strips to make 2 squares that are 10.25 inch big. And then again, remember to label these fabrics as you go, pieces of fabric as you go. That way you don't get confused or mixed up with the different sizes. So hopefully that kind of gives you an idea on how to read the quilting pattern, as well as you know, how to cut the fabrics and prep for it too. So yeah, I'm happy. Oh, hello.
Wendy, that was really informative. And I think
Oh, great.
I love your tutorials on using the rotary cutter, because there have been so many little mishaps with that, even in my studio.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what level sewing you are. Sometimes those can be a little scary. So you gave such a great demonstration on that too.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, it's happened to me so many times that it ends up looking like some murder scene that happened on the cutting mat. And it's like the worst thing ever when you're working with a light piece of fabric as well. It takes me like maybe a good week or 2 to heal up, and it's just the worst thing ever.
Yeah. We don't want any of that. We don't want any of that.
No. Yeah.
So let me bring up so they can have a reminder of what this is going to look like.
Yeah.
Here you go. This is where you can go sign up for her newsletters as reminders for each of these sessions, right, Wendy?
Yeah, so that's correct. So each week you'll receive a email from me, so the weekend quilter or Wendy, and you receive weekly prompts to make sure that you do stay on top of the tasks, the weekly tasks from week 1 to week 6. But of course, you know, sometimes life gets in the way, so it's okay to like go ahead, or maybe you fall back behind. You might be joining the Quilt Along midway. That's also totally fine. You can just go at your own pace. But this email newsletter that goes out weekly is only just for the duration of that Quilt Along. So I'm not going to bombard your inbox or anything. Yeah. And then also in those weekly newsletters, there will also be links back to the blog post as well, that will be living in the Brothers Stitching Social blog. That way, if you had missed anything that I talked about today, or if you don't really have the time to watch a whole video, but then you just want a quick reference, you can always bookmark and go back to those blog posts as well. So yeah, this is the project that you'll be making. Hopefully you can see that, not too much glare. Whoops. Hopefully it's not too much glare, but this is what you'll be making. It's really fun. It's really, really nice and bold project, and it's perfect for the couch, or maybe like a single bed, whatever really works for you, really. Yeah.
fabric for a jacket. I can make the list longer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You could totally make that into a jacket, a quilt jacket.
Oh my God. I love this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is so much fun. So you can leave comments in the chat. If you want to come back and watch these videos, we are streaming on Brothers Sewing Facebook and YouTube pages. You can go back and watch these as well. So Wendy, what do you want them to have done before the next time we meet?
So you would have all your fabrics all cut up, and then we will then move on to strip piecing in the next live, and I'll also show you how to find your 1/4 inch seam allowances and what scant 1/4 seam allowances as well. And I forgot to mention as well with the what's it called, the dimensions of all the squares and rectangles that you're cutting up, that also includes the 1/4 inch seam allowance as well. So you don't need to worry about that. I've done all the math for you.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
This is going to be so much fun. I'm so excited for this. And I know the Brothers Sewing and Crafting family is excited about this as well. Any last minute things before we end this session?
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention. So like be sure to like if you want to follow along to see like what other people are doing and making, or you want to share your work as well, be sure to also tag myself at the.weekendquilter on Facebook as well as Instagram, and also tag Brother Sews as well, and use the hashtag geometric jewels sampler. That way you can kind of maybe get some inspiration behind, like, you know, the different colors that people are using, maybe the different tools, maybe you'll be sharing different tips and whatnot. So I'm really excited to see that whole process come along. So yeah, that's basically it. And we'll see you in the next episode where we'll talk about strip piecing and seam allowances.
That sounds great. Very exciting. So all of you grab your fabric. I'm dying to hear what colors everyone has. I actually have some really cute pink, and I have some fashion ladies in pink. I might have to pull those out of the stash.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Wendy. Thank you all for watching, and I can't wait to see your quilts. Don't forget, #Brothers Sews. Until next time, happy sewing.